Ancient maps hold entire worlds that geography forgot. We are about to chart the lost realms of wonder, those mythic landscapes like El Dorado and Shangri-La that have captivated humanity for centuries. By the end of this journey, you will see how these legendary places are not just fantasies, but powerful keys that unlock the deepest truths about our collective psyche. What hidden reality lies behind the story of a sunken continent? And why does the vision of a hidden kingdom persist across every culture? What forgotten corner of the world do you secretly wish was real? These symbolic territories are born from a profound human need to make sense of the world. For centuries, scholars have pieced together the origins of this field, a discipline that sits at the crossroads of cartography, folklore, and psychology. It begins with the simple, undeniable fact that every culture, in every corner of the globe, has its own version of a lost world or a hidden kingdom. This is not a coincidence. It is a pattern etched into the human spirit. Early explorers, armed with rudimentary maps and boundless courage, would return from their voyages with tales that blended what they had actually seen with the whispers of local legends they had heard. A shimmering lake described by a native guide could transform into the fountain of youth in the retelling. A distant, mist-shrouded mountain range might become the home of the gods. These stories were then carefully inked onto parchment, creating maps where fact and fable coexisted, each one a testament to the hopes and fears of the age that produced it. The quest to understand these mythic landscapes is therefore a journey back to the very moment a story was born, to see the world through the eyes of those who first dared to dream of something more. That scholar, hunched over his desk in the flickering candlelight, was witnessing the birth of a new way of seeing. He was one of the first mythogeographers, a term that would not be coined for many years, but an idea that was already taking root. This field did not emerge from a single brilliant mind, but from the slow convergence of many disciplines. Cartographers were filling their maps with more than just coastlines. Anthropologists were collecting the stories of the people they met, and literary scholars were beginning to see that the oldest stories were often maps to a different kind of truth. They all began to ask the same fundamental question: how does a story over generations become a place? How does a mountain become holy, or a spring become enchanted? A key figure in this convergence was the Prussian explorer Alexander von Humboldt. While he is celebrated for his scientific mapping of South America, he did something just as revolutionary. He meticulously recorded the indigenous legends he heard. He understood that the local story about a thundering waterfall being the home of a spirit was not a primitive superstition to be corrected, but a vital layer of that waterfall's reality. For the people living there, the story and the place were one and the same. This is the core principle of mythogeography. It posits that every sacred grove, every enchanted spring, and every cursed mountain you might find marked on an ancient map is not an error. It is a profound cultural statement. It tells you what a people fears, what it reveres, and how it understands its own small place within a vast and often mysterious cosmos. The maps they created were never just scientific documents. They were narrative landscapes woven with as much wonder as fact. To read them properly, you must learn to read the story as intently as you read the topography. With this lens now focused, we can turn our gaze to the grandest and most enduring of all these mythic landscapes. We journey back deep into antiquity, to the story of a lost continent that continues to haunt our imagination, the Legend of Atlantis. Plato's words echo across 2,000 years, a stark warning etched in ink. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, he describes a formidable island empire, a civilization of immense power and technological marvels. Its people grew arrogant, their hearts corrupted by greed and ambition. And so the story goes, the gods unleashed a cataclysm of earthquakes and floods, swallowing the entire island into the ocean in one terrible day and night. This is the birth of the Atlantis enigma, a story so potent it has never truly left us. It is the ultimate lost civilization, a cautionary tale that speaks to our deepest fears about the instability of the earth and the moral decay of society. For centuries, this legend has been a siren call to explorers and scholars, each hoping to be the one who proves it was real. They have searched from the sunken caldera of Santorini, once the Minoan island of Thera, to the deep waters of the Caribbean, and even to the marshlands of southern Spain. Some see in the story a distorted memory of a real historical disaster, perhaps the volcanic eruption that devastated the Minoan civilization. Others maintain it was always a philosophical fiction, a parable plotto crafted to illustrate the dangers of a society that has lost its way. But whether it was a real place or a brilliant allegory is almost beside the point. The enduring power of Atlantis lies in what it represents, our collective anxiety about the fragility of our own achievements, and a profound longing to believe that wonders of such scale could have once existed. It is the original lost realm, a ghost in the deep that sets the standard for all others. And as we leave the Atlantic mists behind, another ocean whispers its own story of a paradise lost, a legend that rises from the vast blue expanse of the Pacific. While Atlantis sank into the mists of philosophical allegory, another lost continent emerged from the cold logic of 19th century science. The puzzle was a zoological one. How could very similar species of lemurs be found in both Madagascar and India, separated by a vast expanse of ocean? To explain this, scientists proposed a radical idea, a massive land bridge that once connected the two lands. They named this hypothetical continent Lemuria, after the very creatures it was meant to explain. For a brief moment, it was a respectable scientific theory, a ghost continent conjured to fill a gap in the fossil record. But the human imagination is rarely satisfied with mere land bridges. The moment this scientific concept entered the public sphere, it was transformed. Mystics, spiritualists, and members of the growing Theosophical Society seized upon Lemuria. They saw it not as a sunken pathway for animals, but as the lost cradle of a primordial human civilization. In their elaborate vision, the Lemurians were not simple primates, but a race of enlightened, telepathic beings, sometimes described as giant and hermaphroditic, who laid eggs instead of giving live birth. This Lemuria was a pacifist utopia, a society of profound spiritual wisdom that was ultimately destroyed by geological upheaval. Here lies the fascinating twist in the Lemurian tale. Unlike Atlantis, which began as a moral story, Lemuria began as a scientific hypothesis. Its journey from a rational explanation to a full-blown mythological homeland shows us how quickly the line between fact and fiction can blur when we are mapping the unknown. A dry geological proposal became a spiritual beacon, filling a void not just in the map but in the human soul. It satisfied a deep yearning for a purer, more mystical origin story, proving that when science leaves a blank space on the chart, mythology will always rush in to paint a wonder. From this sunken dream of a Pacific paradise, our search for lost realms turns to a landscape of an entirely different nature, the unforgiving ice of the far north. Far to the north, where the Arctic wind begins its long journey south, the ancient Greeks envisioned a paradise untouched by sorrow. They called it Hyperborea, the land beyond the north wind, a realm of eternal spring where the sun never set. According to historians like Herodotus, a race of giants lived there in perfect health and harmony, free from the struggles of disease and the slow decay of old age. This was not a land one could simply sail to. It was a sanctuary for the gods and the occasional legendary hero, an unattainable ideal shimmering on the very edge of the known world. The very concept was likely born from early, bewildering tales of the Arctic's midnight sun, a natural phenomenon so spectacular it could only be explained as the gateway to a divine realm. As geographical knowledge expanded, the location of Hyperborea wandered across the map, drifting from the Scandinavian fjords to the vast, unexplored Siberian tundra. It was a moving target for the human imagination, a perfect example of how our idea of paradise retreats just beyond the horizon of our understanding. Unlike Atlantis, which was violently taken from us, or Lemuria, which was scientifically proposed and then mythologically reimagined, Hyperborea represents a different kind of loss, the loss of a golden age we feel we have simply fallen from. It is a paradise we can no longer find, not because it sank, but because we have lost the purity to see it. This longing for a hidden sanctuary pulls our gaze from the frozen north toward the lush, cloud-wreathed peaks of the Himalayas, where a different kind of perfect world was said to be waiting. The golden dream of El Dorado did not begin with a city, but with a man. High in the Andes, the Muisca people performed a breathtaking ritual at Lake Guatavita. Their new leader, a chieftain they called the Gilded One, would coat his body in gold dust and aboard a raft laden with treasures, dive into the sacred waters as an offering to the gods. For the Muisca, this was a profound spiritual act, a pact between their leader, their people, and the divine. But when Spanish conquistadors heard a fragmented version of this story, they filtered it through a lens of insatiable greed. They heard only one word, gold, and their imaginations did the rest. The Gilded One was no longer a person, he became a place, a king ruling a city where gold was as common as stone. This single misunderstanding ignited one of history's most devastating treasure hunts. For over 2 centuries, expeditions of increasingly desperate and deluded men hacked their way through the Amazon rainforest and scaled the brutal peaks of the Andes. They were driven by a phantom, a legend that kept receding just beyond the next river bend, the next mountain pass. The human cost was staggering. Countless indigenous people were enslaved or killed, and countless explorers met their end from disease, starvation, or conflict in an unforgiving landscape they were wholly unprepared for. Yet, in a terrible irony, this brutal quest for a mirage did something remarkable. It forced the mapping of the South American interior. The trails blazed by men like Francisco de Orellana, who was the first European to navigate the entire length of the Amazon River while searching for El Dorado, filled in vast blank spaces on the European map. The legend of El Dorado, therefore, is a dual tragedy, a story of cultural destruction and of a spiritual ritual grotesquely twisted into a symbol of material lust. It proves that a myth, once unleashed, can reshape the very world, charting real rivers and mountains with the fuel of a false promise. This desperate search for earthly treasure compels us to look upward, to a kingdom that promised a wealth of an entirely different kind, a sanctuary hidden high in the clouds. High in the snowbound silence of the Himalayas, a different kind of kingdom waits. Buddhist scriptures describe a hidden valley, a realm of perfected beings called Shambhala, shielded from the outside world by a ring of impassable mountains. This is no sunken ruin or abandoned city. It is a sanctuary of profound peace and advanced spiritual knowledge, a celestial realm existing simultaneously on the earth and beyond it. Its gates are not locked by stone but by karma, opening only to those whose minds and hearts have been purified. The Kalachakra teachings, central to Tibetan Buddhism, speak of Shambhala not as a memory but as a prophecy. They tell of a future time when the world is engulfed in war, greed, and spiritual decay. It is only then, at humanity's darkest hour, that the king of Shambhala will emerge with a vast army to defeat the forces of darkness and inaugurate a global golden age. This is what sets Shambhala apart from every other lost realm. It is not a cautionary tale of what was lost, but a promise of what is yet to be found. It is a beacon, a fixed point of hope assuring us that a seed of perfection is preserved, waiting for the right season to bloom. This powerful vision has drawn everyone from devout pilgrims to cynical dictators, from spiritual seekers who see it as an inner state of consciousness to explorers who have fruitlessly scanned satellite images of Central Asia for its geometric capital, Kalapa. The myth of Shambhala demonstrates more than any other how a landscape of the mind can shape the landscape of reality, inspiring both profound inner transformation and very real, often turbulent worldly quests. From this promised land of future peace, our journey descends into the misty, haunted glens of a much older landscape, where the veil between our world and another is said to be tissue-thin. A different kind of mist shrouds the Isle of Avalon, a vapor not of ocean spray but of pure enchantment. In the twilight of Arthurian legend, after the terrible battle of Camlan, the mortally wounded King Arthur is borne away upon a black barge. His destination is not a tomb but a sanctuary, the mystical island where his sword Excalibur was forged. This is Avalon, the Isle of Apples, a place suspended between worlds. In the Celtic beliefs that gave it life, Avalon was one of the many portals to the other world, a parallel dimension of eternal youth and powerful magic, home to fairy folk and divine smiths. It was not a place one could find by sailing in a straight line. Its shores were only revealed to those who were lost or dying or chosen. The veil between our reality and its own was thin, parting at liminal times like the gloaming or on certain holy days. This was a realm where time itself flowed differently, where a single night of feasting could span 100 years in the world outside. The island's deep connection to apples was no accident. In Celtic symbology, the apple represented immortality and wisdom, the very fruit of the other world. So when Arthur was taken to Avalon to heal, it was not merely a medical retreat, it was a journey into the heart of myth itself, a transition from the bloody field of mortal conflict to a timeless, restorative space. This potent myth soon demanded a physical home, and it found one at Glastonbury Tor in Somerset, England. Rising abruptly from the flat Somerset levels, the Tor, especially when wreathed in its characteristic low-lying mist, looks exactly like an island. In the 12th century, monks at Glastonbury Abbey made a stunning announcement. They had discovered the bones of King Arthur and Queen Guinevere buried deep within their grounds. This was not a random archaeological claim. It was a deliberate act of myth-making, an attempt to anchor a sprawling national legend to a specific and highly profitable pilgrimage site. The Tor became Avalon, and the streams surrounding it were said to be the watery remnants of the lake that once isolated the Holy Isle. This fusion of place and story created a sacred geography that persists to this day. Pilgrims still climb the Tor not because of its geology, but because of the story it tells. Avalon's greatest lesson is that a landscape becomes sacred not through its physical features alone, but through the profound narratives we inscribe upon it. It embodies the powerful promise of the once and future king, the idea that a great leader is not gone forever, but merely sleeping, waiting for the hour of his people's greatest need to return. This is a promise of restoration, a deep-seated cultural hope that what was lost can be made whole again. From this misty island of promised return, we journey to a vision of a world that exists beyond the final sunset, a realm not of restoration, but of eternal peace. Across the Atlantic, a different vision of paradise took root in the hearts of the people who knew the land most intimately. For many plains tribes, the world did not end with death. It transformed into the happy hunting grounds. This was no city of gold or mountain fortress, but a boundless, rolling prairie where the spirit could run free forever. Here, the buffalo were always plentiful, their great herds moving like a dark river across the eternally green grass. Ancestors lived in a state of pure joy and abundance, reunited with the animals they had hunted and honored in life. This mythic landscape was not a lost civilization to be rediscovered, but a spiritual destination, a final home that reflected the most profound truths of their existence. Their entire cultural identity, their sustenance, and their spirituality were woven from their relationship with the land and its creatures. The happy hunting grounds was the ultimate expression of that bond, a world where the sacred balance between hunter and hunted was perfectly and forever restored. It stands in stark contrast to the European idea of a heavenly city with streets of gold, a static and ordered realm. This was a paradise of motion, of the hunt, of the cycle of life continuing in perfect harmony. While the specifics of this afterlife varied from tribe to tribe, the core vision remained consistent, an idealized mirror of their earthly life. A culture that lived by the hunt would not dream of a paradise without it. They dreamed of a hunt made sacred, where no animal suffered and no person knew want. This projection of core values onto the landscape of the afterlife shows us that our deepest desires shape our grandest destinations. From this vision of a cyclical, harmonious spirit world, our search turns to the opposite side of the globe, to islands whispered about long before any European ship ever set sail for their shores. Far to the west, beyond the known boundaries of the ancient world, lay a promise reserved for the greatest of heroes, past the Pillars of Hercules, where the Mediterranean Sea gave way to the terrifying, trackless ocean. Greek poets like Hesiod spoke of the Fortunate Isles. This was not a land for the living, but a final, glorious destination for the souls of the heroic and the virtuous dead. Imagine a place of eternal spring, where the earth provided its bounty without toil, and sorrow was a forgotten language. Here, the greatest of the Greek heroes, figures like Achilles and Ajax, were said to live a second life, one of perfect peace and happiness. This was the classical ideal of Elysium made manifest, a retirement home for the righteous that shaped the very concept of an earned paradise. The allure of this myth was so powerful that it refused to remain a mere story. Centuries later, when European sailors began to tentatively push their ships into the Atlantic, they carried these ancient tales with them like charts. The discovery of archipelagos like the Canaries and Madeira, with their lush volcanic soils and miraculously mild climates, felt like a prophecy fulfilled. They had found the Fortunate Isles, or so they believed. The names they gave these new lands were a direct inheritance from the old myths, anchoring a poetic dream to a tangible shoreline. This process reveals a profound truth about how we explore. Myths often serve as our proto-maps. They provide a template, a set of expectations that guides our gaze and names our discoveries. The legend of the Fortunate Isles did not just describe a heavenly reward. It actively directed the course of exploration, proving that the stories we tell about the world can, in time, become the world we inhabit. From this Atlantic paradise born of heroic virtue, our search pivots to a very different kind of legend, a desert mirage conjured not from virtue, but from an almost unimaginable concentration of wealth. The Sahara's endless dunes hold a different kind of promise, a city of white walls and untold riches whispered on the dry wind. For generations, Bedouin storytellers spoke of Zerzura, the oasis of the little birds, a hidden city slumbering deep within the most desolate part of the Libyan desert. Its gates were said to be guarded by sleeping giants, and within its cool, shaded courtyards, treasure lay untouched, waiting for the one who could find the secret path through the sand seas. This was not a sunken continent or a Himalayan kingdom, but a phantom born from the very nature of the desert itself. In that brutal landscape, where the heat shimmers and the horizon wavers, a desperate thirst could make a man see a glittering city where there was only rock and sky. Zerzura was the ultimate expression of that hope, a mirage given a name and a legend. By the early 20th century, this ancient folktale had captivated a new breed of adventurer. They formed the Zerzura Club, a band of intrepid explorers who swapped their camels for motorcars and biplanes, determined to use modern technology to find this ancient dream. They scoured the Gilfkebir, a vast and remote plateau the size of Switzerland that was one of the last blank spaces on the African map. The city of Zerzura itself remained stubbornly hidden, but the search for it forced the mapping of this entire forbidding region. And in the process, they found something perhaps even more valuable than a fabled treasure. In wadis, dry river valleys cut deep into the rock, they discovered breathtaking galleries of prehistoric rock art. These ancient paintings depicted a world that was the true lost oasis, a Sahara that was once green and fertile, teeming with giraffes, elephants, and cattle, a land where water was plentiful and human communities thrived. The myth of Zerzura, a story born from lack, had led them directly to the archaeological evidence of a time of abundance. The phantom city was never real, but the quest to find it unveiled a profound historical truth, proving that the map of human imagination is often the most reliable guide to the secrets of the actual Earth. The dragons drawn at the edge of the known world were not mere decoration. They were a warning, a declaration that beyond a certain point, the rules of familiar geography no longer applied. Unfolding an ancient map like the Hereford Mappa Mundi is to open a book of beliefs where the city of Jerusalem sits at the very center of the earth, and the Garden of Paradise is depicted as a walled island at the top, a physical place one could theoretically reach. Medieval cartographers saw no contradiction in placing the mythical island of St. Brendan or the phantom Isle of Brassel just west of Ireland. For them, the world was a single, unified reality composed of three inseparable layers: the physical land, the spiritual truth, and the stories that bound them together. These maps were functional, holistic documents. A sea serpent illustrated in the ocean warned sailors of treacherous waters or unknown creatures. The depiction of a biblical scene in a distant land reinforced the global reach of divine history. And perhaps most fundamentally, that human urge to fill emptiness, to resist the terror of a blank space, meant that if knowledge ended, imagination would gladly take over. Every curl of a monster's tail, every sketched castle in a mountain range, reveals the deepest fears and the highest hopes of the age. This cartographic tradition, where the seen and the unseen shared the same parchment, finds a powerful echo in a different way of understanding the land, one that does not separate the spiritual from the physical at all. Indigenous cultures often navigate by a sacred geography, where every mountain, river, and forest grove is alive with meaning and memory. A specific rock formation is not just a landmark, it is the petrified body of an ancestral being. A particular spring is not merely a source of water, it is a place where the veil between worlds is thin. Their map is not drawn on vellum, but sung in ceremonies and walked in pilgrimage, a living landscape woven from story. This is not myth placed on a map, it is the map itself that is mythical, every path a verse in an epic poem of belonging. How does such a deep, storied connection to place shape a culture's identity, and what happens when that connection is violently severed? The answer lies in the most potent lost realm of all, one that is not a city of gold, but a homeland, a concept that has fueled both the quietest longing and the most powerful political movements of the modern world. The land itself speaks if you know how to listen. For countless indigenous cultures, the physical world is not a collection of inert resources but a living, breathing narrative. The very ground beneath your feet is a sacred text, its chapters written in the contours of hills and the courses of rivers, each one imbued with memory and spiritual power. This is a geography not of coordinates but of consciousness. In Australia, the Aboriginal understanding of the Dreamtime illustrates this perfectly. It describes a foundational era when ancestral beings, often taking animal or human form, journeyed across a formless world, With every step they took, every battle they fought, every song they sang, they shaped the landscape into being. A particular rock formation is not just a rock, it is the petrified body of the rainbow serpent. A waterhole is not merely a source of water, it is the very spring where the ancestor emerged from the earth. The Dreamtime is not a finished event locked in the past, it is a continuous presence, and the land remains charged with the creative essence of those first beings. To walk across this country is to retrace the steps of the creators, and to know the story of each feature is to participate in the ongoing act of creation itself. A similar, profound intimacy with place defines the Navajo world. Their homeland is not just a territory, it is a sanctified space demarcated by 4 sacred mountains, each one standing as a sentinel in a cardinal direction. These peaks are not passive landmarks, they are living deities, each holding specific spiritual significance, colors, and teachings that define the Navajo people's identity and their place in the cosmos. The land is a relative, a protector, and a guide. From these perspectives, the idea of a mythic landscape as something lost or separate completely dissolves. These are not realms one searches for on a forgotten map. They are hidden in plain sight, woven into the fabric of the everyday world. Their true nature is not perceived by the physical eye alone, but through the lens of cultural knowledge and inherited story. A mountain is only a mountain to an outsider, but to the people who belong to it, it is a chapter in their collective soul, a pillar of their existence. This worldview presents a powerful challenge to the Western hunt for lost cities and sunken continents. It suggests that the division we make between real geography and mythic geography is an artificial one. All land is ultimately mythic to those who know its stories, and a landscape without a story is simply a blank space waiting for meaning. When we recognize this deep, universal impulse to inscribe our beliefs onto the earth, we begin to see the common threads that connect the human family, from the deserts of Australia to the mesas of the American Southwest. This shared yearning to find meaning in the land compels us to ask what fundamental human needs are being expressed through all these varied tales of wonder. These archetypes form a hidden language, a universal grammar of wonder spoken across every continent. The story of the sunken city, for instance, is a tale told by coastlines everywhere. From the Breton legend of Wise, a city drowned when its princess unlocked the sea gates, to the Indian myth of Dwarka, Krishna's celestial capital reclaimed by the ocean, these narratives echo a deep-seated primal fear. We build our civilizations on what feels like solid ground, yet these stories remind us that the earth itself can shift in an instant. They are cultural memories of tsunamis and floods, transformed into powerful warnings against the arrogance of believing we can ever truly master nature. The earthly paradise, in contrast, offers a soothing antidote to this anxiety. Whether it is Shangri-La's secluded valley, the garden of the Hesperides with its golden apples, or the Buddhist pure land of Sakavati, this archetype paints a picture of a world without toil, sickness, or death. It is the human heart's timeless response to the inevitable hardships of existence, a dream of retreat and perfect peace. Then there is the compelling call of the hidden kingdom, a realm like Agartha, said to exist inside our hollow planet, or the Celtic term Na en Og, an island veiled by mist. This archetype whispers that the greatest truths are not lying in plain sight. They are reserved, hidden away, accessible only to those with the courage to seek and the purity to perceive. It transforms the act of exploration into a spiritual quest where the destination is not just a place but a state of enlightenment. And finally, the Golden City, from El Dorado to the 7 cities of Cibola, holds up a mirror to our most material desires. It is a glittering symbol of ambition, a beacon that can lead to both discovery and destruction, revealing how easily the quest for treasure can corrupt the human spirit. When we see the same 4 or 5 stories emerging independently from the deserts, the mountains, and the seas, we are witnessing something profound. It is not that these cultures were copying one another, but that the human mind, when confronted with the vast unknown, reaches for the same fundamental tools to make sense of it all. We use the language of landscape to ask our biggest questions. What is the price of power? Where can we find peace? What is truly valuable? These mythic maps are humanity's collective attempt to chart the answers. But what happens when these deeply held beliefs collide with the hard, unyielding surface of reality? The consequences of following these maps can be as transformative as the legends themselves. A story once set loose upon the world can become a force as tangible as any ocean current. The Great Age of Exploration, a period celebrated for its scientific daring, was in fact propelled by a potent mixture of myth and map. When Christopher Columbus made his case to sail west, he was not guided solely by new navigational theories. He carried with him the fantastical travelogues of Marco Polo, which described the immense riches and wonders of the East. More profoundly, he was steeped in the medieval belief in a terrestrial paradise, a perfect earthly realm he genuinely hoped to find on his journey. His calculations of the Earth's size were skewed by these alluring stories, convincing him that Asia was far closer than it truly was, a miscalculation that led him to an entirely new world. This was not an isolated case. For centuries, the Phantom of Terra Australis Incognita, a vast and wealthy southern continent hypothesized by ancient geographers to balance the northern landmasses, lured ship after ship into the treacherous southern seas. It was a cartographic ghost that stubbornly refused to vanish until the meticulous voyages of Captain James Cook in the 18th century finally proved its non-existence. In the process, he meticulously charted the real coastlines of Australia and the icy perimeter of Antarctica, replacing a beautiful fiction with a magnificent, if harsher, reality. Meanwhile, in the sweltering heart of South America, the legends of El Dorado and the Amazons were actively shaping the landscape. The Spanish conquistador Francisco de Orellana, while searching for the Golden City, became the first European to navigate the entire length of a colossal river. He named it the Amazon after his party reported being attacked by female warriors, a story that directly echoed the Greek myth of a tribe of fierce women. The river, and by extension the entire rainforest, was christened with a name born from ancient mythology, a label that persists to this day. These quests, fueled by a blend of greed, faith, and wonder, had consequences that echo through history. They resulted in the mapping of continents and a permanent, often tragic, exchange of cultures and diseases. They prove, beyond any doubt, that a compelling narrative can redraw the world for better or for worse. This leaves us with a pressing modern question. In an age of satellites and deep-sea submersibles, what role do these ancient stories play? Does science simply dismiss them as charming fictions, or is there a new, more nuanced conversation beginning to emerge? Satellites now map every inch of our planet, yet the old stories refuse to die. Instead of fading into obscurity, these mythic landscapes are being reborn through the very lens of modern science, which offers a startling new way to listen to their whispers. Geologists, for instance, look at the universal story of a great flood and see not fantasy, but a possible cultural memory of a world-altering event. As the last ice age retreated, colossal meltwater pulses caused sea levels to rise by hundreds of feet, swallowing vast stretches of coastal land that were once home to human communities. The flooding of the Black Sea Basin around 5,600 years ago, which may have turned a freshwater lake into a saltwater sea in a dramatic surge, is one compelling candidate for the genesis of flood myths. Similarly, the rich hunting grounds of Doggerland, a landmass that once connected Britain to mainland Europe, were slowly inundated by the rising North Sea. For the people who lived there, watching their world vanish beneath the waves over generations, the event would have been cataclysmic, a story of a lost land passed down for centuries. This scientific perspective does not debunk the myth of a sunken world. It gives it a terrifying new reality, suggesting that legends of Atlantis and others like it could be the distant, poetic echoes of actual geological trauma. This marriage of technology and tale continues on solid ground. For generations, local folklore in Cambodia spoke of a vast, god-built city reclaimed by the jungle. To early Western explorers, these stories seemed like pure fantasy. But today, archaeologists armed with LiDAR, a technology that uses laser pulses to see through the dense forest canopy, have revealed the staggering truth. The complex of Angkor Wat was merely the ceremonial heart of a sprawling urban metropolis, the largest pre-industrial city in the world, complete with canals, roads, and suburbs. The myth was not wrong. It was simply waiting for our tools to catch up to its scale. The same is true for the great Mayan cities like Tikal, where ground-penetrating radar is now revealing networks of hidden structures and roadways, proving these were not isolated temples but parts of a vast, interconnected civilization that collapsed and was slowly forgotten, becoming the stuff of local legend before being scientifically rediscovered. Even the most dramatic of ancient stories is being re-examined. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis proposes that a comet or asteroid struck the Earth around 12,800 years ago, triggering a mini ice age and catastrophic flooding. While still debated, this theory provides a plausible, scientific mechanism for the kind of sudden, global cataclysm that could have obliterated a sophisticated culture, lending a new, speculative credibility to the foundational story of Atlantis. Science, therefore, is not the enemy of wonder, but its most powerful interpreter. It sifts through the layers of allegory and exaggeration to find the potential kernel of truth, the real event that sparked the unforgettable story. A legend becomes a puzzle, and the tools of geology, archaeology, and astronomy become the keys that might one day unlock it. This process transforms our ancient myths from mere fictions into potential, if deeply distorted, historical records. They become the way our ancestors tried to make sense of world-shattering events they could not otherwise explain. The Great Deluge was not a god's punishment, but a rising sea. The lost Golden City was not a mirage, but a memory of a magnificent capital consumed by the forest. This scientific reinterpretation does not strip these stories of their magic. It grounds their wonder in the profound and tumultuous history of our planet and our species. And with this new understanding, we can see how these age-old narratives continue to pulse with life, directly shaping the stories we tell about ourselves today. A shimmering, hidden kingdom is no longer confined to ancient parchment. It thrives today on the silver screen and the video game console, proving these archetypes are not relics but living engines of modern storytelling. J.R.R. Tolkien, a scholar of ancient languages and myths, did not merely write a fantasy novel. He performed an act of profound mythography, constructing the entire world of Middle-earth with its own detailed maps, histories, and languages. He drew directly from the deep wells of European folklore, from the noble elves of Celtic lore to the fearsome dragons of Norse sagas, weaving them into a landscape that feels authentically ancient. Because his world was so meticulously mapped both in geography and in spirit, it resonates with the same weight and depth as the legends that inspired it. We do not just read about Middle-earth, we feel we could walk its paths because Tolkien understood that a truly powerful mythic landscape must feel inhabited, storied, and real. A very different kind of kingdom redefines this tradition for the modern era. The fictional nation of Wakanda from the Black Panther franchise is a direct and brilliant reimagining of the Hidden Kingdom archetype. It is a Shambhala for the technological age, an African nation that was never colonized. its dazzling advanced civilization concealed from the world by a protective veil. Wakanda taps into that timeless longing for a secluded sanctuary of wisdom and power, but it crucially reframes it, challenging historical narratives of exploitation and presenting a vision of what might have been. This is not a lost city to be plundered by outsiders, but a sovereign realm that controls its own destiny and its own wonders. The quest for these realms has also become profoundly interactive. In video games like Uncharted and Tomb Raider, you are no longer a passive listener to the legend, you are the explorer. You scale crumbling temple walls, decipher ancient puzzles, and brave deadly traps in a direct digital inheritance of the treasure hunting tradition. These games cast you as the modern protagonist in an age-old story, making you an active participant in the mapping of myth. The enduring power of these stories across so many mediums reveals a fundamental truth. They are more than simple entertainment, they are the vital channels through which these ancient archetypes continue to breathe. They keep the questions alive for every new generation. What would you sacrifice to find a lost world? How would you wield the power of a hidden kingdom? They allow us to safely project our own hopes and fears onto these legendary canvases, to engage with the timeless human themes of exploration, discovery, and the search for a better world. The filmmakers, writers, and game developers are our modern cartographers of wonder, drawing new maps on the vibrant canvas of our collective imagination. This creative resurgence does more than keep the old stories alive. It invites us to find our own place within them. The most powerful mythic landscapes are not always the grandest. They are the ones you pass by every day without a second glance. That gnarled oak tree at the edge of the park might be the very spot where, according to local lore, a Civil War soldier hid a treasure. The old, abandoned quarry might be whispered to be haunted by the ghost of a miner. You do not need a map to El Dorado to begin this exploration. You simply need to listen to the stories your own town has been telling for generations. Every community, no matter how small or modern, holds these narrative treasures. There is the bend in the river known as Lover's Leap, the foundation of a house rumored to have been part of the Underground Railroad, or the peculiar rock in a suburban backyard that local children insist is a meteorite. These are not just tales, they are the unofficial, living history of a place, a layer of meaning that exists just beneath the surface of the asphalt and street signs. To engage with them is to practice a form of deep mapping. This is not about cartography in the traditional sense, it is about charting the invisible. It involves walking through an old neighborhood and asking what happened here. Why is that one house always set back from the others? What is the real story behind the name of that creek? A visit to a local historical society can reveal that the haunted forest was once the site of a poorhouse, or that the wishing well was the only reliable water source for early settlers. The common trope of the old Indian burial ground, found in towns across the country, often says more about a community's unresolved anxieties about its own history than about actual archaeological fact. When you start this process, you become a mythographer of your own environment. You are no longer just a resident, you are a detective of wonder, piecing together the narrative soul of the place you call home. The crossroads you drive through daily becomes charged with the legend of a famous duel. The quiet pond becomes the lake where a town founder nearly drowned. This practice does not change the physical world, but it fundamentally alters your perception of it, transforming the mundane into the marvelous. It proves that wonder is not a destination you must travel to find, but a lens you can learn to see through. And if a simple local legend can contain such depth, what profound mysteries might be waiting within the greatest hidden world of all, the one that exists not on the land, but inside the human mind itself? Our planet's secrets were not always thought to lie across the seas, but directly beneath our feet. The hollow earth theory proposed a radical reimagining of our world's very structure, envisioning it not as a solid sphere but as a hollow shell containing within it an entire habitable universe. This was not a fleeting fantasy but a serious, if flawed, scientific hypothesis championed by brilliant minds. The astronomer Edmund Halley of comet fame proposed a hollow Earth model with concentric spheres and a central sun to explain anomalous magnetic field readings. A century later, the American Army officer John Cleves Sims Jr. became so captivated by the idea that he campaigned relentlessly for an expedition, convinced that giant, warm openings at the North and South Poles led to this inner realm. The theory was an attempt to make sense of genuine mysteries. Where did the migrating birds disappear to each winter? Perhaps they flew into the polar openings to enjoy the eternal summer of the interior world. What caused the strange, warm ocean currents in the Arctic? They must be flowing from the warm seas of the inner Earth. Even the ethereal glow of the aurora borealis was interpreted by some as the escaped light from the central sun, filtering out through the thin polar ice. This was a geography of pure deduction, built on a foundation of observation and a mountain of speculation. It created the ultimate hidden kingdom, a world not just concealed by distance, but by the very ground we walk on, accessible only through legendary polar gateways or deep subterranean tunnels. Of course, modern science has thoroughly dismantled the idea. Seismology reveals our planet's layered internal structure through the behavior of earthquake waves, which could not propagate as they do through a hollow sphere. Physics confirms the immense pressures and temperatures at the Earth's core that would make any habitable cavity impossible. Yet, the theory's death as a scientific model only amplified its birth as a literary legend. Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth gave us a thrilling travelogue into this subterranean wonder, complete with giant mushrooms and prehistoric reptiles. Edgar Rice Burroughs created Pellucidar, a land where time stood still and dinosaurs roamed under the light of an eternal central sun. The hollow Earth represents the final frontier of the mythic landscape, shifting the axis of exploration from the horizontal to the vertical. It proves that when the map is filled in every other direction, our imagination will simply invent a new dimension to explore, populating the darkness below with all the wonders the surface can no longer hold. This enduring impulse to chart the unseen forces us to ask a deeper question. What are the fundamental tools we use to navigate not just the land, but the stories we tell about it? These recurring symbols form the very alphabet of mythic geography. Just as a cartographer uses green for a forest and blue for a river, the mapmaker of dreams employs a powerful, shared vocabulary of forms. The labyrinth, for instance, is rarely just a maze. It is a universal symbol for the difficult, winding path of a spiritual quest, where the goal is not merely to reach the center, but to be transformed by the journey itself. Similarly, a bridge is almost never just a way to cross a chasm. It marks a critical threshold, a deliberate transition from the familiar, mundane world into a sacred or supernatural space. To cross it is to accept a change in the very rules of reality. The mountain stands as perhaps the most consistent symbol across all cultures. Its peak, scraping the sky, has always been seen as a place of revelation, a vantage point closer to the divine where one might receive wisdom or a commanding vision of the world below. In stark contrast, the cave plunges into the earth, representing a descent into the self. It can be a womb of rebirth, where an initiate emerges with new knowledge, a repository of ancient wisdom guarded by a spirit, or a direct gateway to the terrifying mysteries of the underworld. And then there is water in all its forms. A wide, rushing river or a trackless sea almost always serves as the ultimate boundary between the world of the living and the world of the dead, or between the known and the utterly unknown. A spring or a well bubbling up from the depths is conversely a source of life, healing, and purification, a place where one can wash away the past and begin anew. When you learn this symbolic language, you begin to read these legendary maps on a completely different level. The features of the landscape are no longer arbitrary decorations. They are a carefully chosen code, each element placed with intention to convey profound psychological and spiritual concepts. The story is not just happening in the landscape itself is the story. Its geography a direct expression of an inner, emotional state. This deeper understanding, however, brings with it a crucial responsibility. As we gain the ability to decode these wondrous tales, we must also ask ourselves how we should approach them. Who truly owns these stories, and what are the ethics of exploring another culture's most sacred dreams? Mapping these sacred territories demands an ethical compass as much as a geographical one. The line between cultural appreciation and appropriation is not always clear on the ground, but its consequences are profoundly real. When thousands of tourists climb Australia's Uluru each year, they see a dramatic rock formation. For the Anangu people, it is a living, breathing creation ancestor, a sacred site where their very law and identity were formed. Every footstep on its surface against their explicit wishes is not just a hike, it is a spiritual violation, a modern echo of colonization imposed upon a spiritual geography. This dynamic repeats itself when New Age movements cherry-pick elements from Native American ceremonies, using sweat lodges or vision quests as self-help workshops stripped of their deep cultural context, community obligations, and generations of inherited knowledge. The harm here is a theft of meaning, reducing a living, breathing spiritual tradition to an exotic accessory. True appreciation operates from a position of humility. It begins with listening and learning, seeking to understand how the source culture views its own stories. For many indigenous peoples, these narratives are not myths in the sense of being false or fictional. They are living truths, the very bedrock of identity, law, and connection to country. They are maps for how to live in right relationship with the world. Our role as mythographers, then, is not to claim these stories or to declare we have discovered their one true meaning. It is to act as respectful curators and careful translators. We hold up the narrative so that the original voices are amplified and the original meanings are centered and preserved. This ethical commitment ensures that our cartography of wonder does not become another form of trespass. To navigate this complex terrain, a specific tool can help us visualize the incredible web of connections these stories create. Your own life is already a vast, uncharted territory waiting for its mythographer. To begin mapping it, find a large sheet of paper and let it become the canvas for your personal saga. This is not about drawing to scale, but about giving form to feeling. Start with the anchors of your memory, the real places that have shaped you. Sketch the rough outline of your childhood home, the one that felt like an entire kingdom. Paste a photograph of that quiet beach where you felt a profound peace, or trace the route to your first job, a journey that once defined your days. These are the foundational coastlines of your personal world. Now pick up a different colored pen and begin the real magic. Overlay these literal locations with the mythic geography of your experience. That period of confusion and difficult choices you navigated last year, that was not just a tough time, it was your forest of uncertainty. Draw its tangled trees right over the city block where you lived. Identify the source that consistently refills your spirit, whether it is playing music, cooking for friends, or walking in nature. That is your personal river of inspiration. Sketch its winding course across the page. The big goal you are working toward, the advanced degree, the new business, the personal milestone, that is your mountain of achievement. Give it a proud peak and mark the base camp where you are currently resting and the treacherous cliffs you still have to climb. Feel free to raid the entire treasure chest of global symbolism for your map. If your life journey feels like a winding path of self-discovery, draw a labyrinth at its heart. If you dream of vitality and renewal, illustrate a small, shimmering fountain of youth in a corner, representing your hopes for health and energy. Perhaps a dragon guards a cave of a fear you have yet to face, or a bridge marks the moment you crossed from one phase of your life into another. This creative act is a form of deep self-reflection. It externalizes the invisible struggles, joys, and aspirations that define your inner world. By visualizing your path in this symbolic language, you are not just making art, you are reading the legend of your own life, understanding its challenges as epic trials and its triumphs as legendary victories. This practice forges a direct, personal bridge between the ancient human urge to map wonder and the unique narrative of your own existence. As we learn to chart our own souls, we must wonder how these timeless stories will navigate the uncharted waters of the future. The glowing screen is our new parchment and the cursor our modern compass. We are no longer limited to inking coastlines on vellum. We can now build entire continents from pure code, crafting digital realms that millions can explore simultaneously. In sprawling online worlds like World of Warcraft, the geography is not just a backdrop for adventure, it is a foundational part of the myth. The frozen peaks of Dun Morog, the haunted ruins of the Plaguelands, these are not random game levels, they are locations steeped in a meticulously written history, a living lore that players learn and inhabit as they journey through them. These virtual landscapes function exactly like their ancient counterparts. They are maps of a shared belief system, complete with their own creation stories, pantheons of gods, and legendary heroes whose deeds shape the very mountains and valleys. This is mythography in real time, a collective act of world building where the map and the story are being written together by developers and players alike. The exploration has become democratized. You are no longer just reading about a lost city. You and your friends are the first to breach its gates, solving its puzzles and battling its guardians. This interactive dimension adds a powerful new layer to the experience, making the mythic landscape feel personally discovered and earned. But the digital revolution extends beyond these purely fictional worlds. With a few clicks on Google Earth, you can perform a kind of cartographic time travel. You can drape a 16th century map depicting California as a massive island over the crisp satellite photograph of the real Baja Peninsula. The effect is startling. It visually demonstrates how a cartographic era, fueled by hopeful legends of Amazon queens and abundant gold, could persist for centuries, creating a phantom landmass that was only slowly corrected by more accurate exploration. Augmented reality pushes this fusion of data and dream even further. Imagine pointing your phone at a nondescript city intersection and seeing a ghostly overlay of the medieval street plan that once existed there, or the spectral image of a long-demolished building where a famous event occurred. These technologies are not erasing our need for myth. They are providing us with powerful new tools to visualize the layers of story that have always been there, hidden just beneath the surface of the real. The digital realm has become the newest and most expansive continent for our lost realms of wonder, a limitless space where the ancient human urge to map the marvelous finds a thrilling new expression. And this persistent power across millennia and media forces a final, profound question. Why do we keep returning to these maps of nowhere, and what fundamental human need do they truly serve? Our minds are not just passive recipients of these stories, they are active participants in their creation, driven by a fundamental psychological need. These lost realms function as what psychologists call potential spaces, a crucial mental playground where the rules of our everyday reality can be suspended. In this imaginative territory, we are free to experiment with our deepest fears and our highest hopes without any real-world consequences. We can safely explore the idea of a perfect society, turning the myth of Shangri-La over in our minds to better understand what is lacking in our own communities. We can confront the terrifying concept of a cataclysm through the story of Atlantis, processing our collective anxiety about environmental collapse or social decay from a safe, narrative distance. This is not mere escapism, it is a vital form of mental rehearsal. By journeying through these imaginary landscapes, we are actually building our cognitive flexibility and strengthening our capacity for creative problem solving. The comfort these myths provide is profound. In a world that often feels exhaustively documented by satellites and algorithms, the persistent whisper that a hidden valley or a sunken city might still exist offers a powerful antidote to the tyranny of the mundane. It suggests that mystery has not been entirely eradicated, that magic might still linger just beyond the next ridge, forever eluding our digital surveillance. This belief, however faint, keeps our sense of wonder alive. It reassures us that the world has not given up all its secrets, that there are still frontiers for the human spirit, even if they now exist primarily within the geography of the mind. Furthermore, these myths serve as essential coping mechanisms. When our own societies feel fractured or corrupt, the vision of a just and peaceful kingdom like Shambhala provides both a critique of the present and a beacon for the future. During personal or collective times of trouble, the promise of a hidden sanctuary, whether it is the happy hunting grounds or the fortunate isles, offers a psychological refuge, a place of rest and restoration we can retreat to in our thoughts. The map is never truly complete because the human imagination is a boundless and ever-renewing territory. As long as we face uncertainty, as long as we yearn for better worlds, and as long as we need spaces to dream, we will continue to chart these realms of wonder. This timeless tradition is far more than a cultural curiosity. It is a fundamental expression of human resilience and hope, a testament to our unshakable belief that there is always something more to find, both outside in the world and deep within ourselves. Our journey across these mythic landscapes reveals that every lost realm is a map of the human soul. From the sunken spires of Atlantis to the hidden peace of Shambhala, these stories are not mistakes on a parchment, but intentional cartography of our collective spirit. They chart our deepest anxieties about a world that can be lost in a single day and night, and our most soaring hopes for a sanctuary of perfect peace. They give form to our questions about power, morality, and what lies beyond the final horizon. This is not a collection of isolated tales, but a global network of wonder, a web of shared archetypes that connects the storytelling of every culture across continents and centuries. These narratives have propelled ships across uncharted oceans, guided brushes across canvases, and provided a profound solace in times of hardship. They prove that our need to imagine a place beyond the known map is as fundamental as our need for shelter or community. As we now turn our gaze to the deep ocean trenches and the red sands of Mars, we carry this ancient tradition with us. We are still drawing maps of wonder, projecting our hopes and fears onto new frontiers, forever searching for the next lost realm. The greatest exploration has never been just of land, but of imagination itself. If this voyage has sparked your own sense of wonder, we would love to hear about it. What is your favorite mythic landscape? Share it in the comments below and subscribe for more journeys into the unknown.